The opinions expressed on this program are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect those of Cable 14, its sponsors, or its shareholders, Cogeco Cable, Shaw Cable, and Source Cable Limited.
And welcome to Council Edition for Wednesday, October 17th. My name is Doug Farraway. On today's show, from a new stadium to the OMB a little bit, a mounted police unit, a downtown casino possibility, the Keith neighborhood, and breaking news from City Hall. Our guest is Ward 3 Councillor Bernie Morelli, and it's good to have you here.
Thanks, Doug. Pleasure to be here.
So let's start with that breaking news from City Hall. It was a long day again at the General Issues Committee. Highlighted, I think, and I have to declare a bias at this point because I am a friend of Ockmar and on the executive with the Friends of Ockmar. But Ockmar was there. It's been the long-awaited report to come out of Planning and Economic Development, headed up by Tim McCabe and Anna Bradford in the Culture Division. And they reported today and asked Council basically to receive the direction that they intend to go in. Fill us in from there.
Well, first of all, I can understand why you're a friend of Ockmar. You know, as recently as a couple of weeks ago, not that it was the first time I'd been on the site, but we were up there again taking a look at it. And it's very clear to me that you know, when I think and reflect on these types of units, so whether it be Dunderd Castle, the one that stands out mostly in my mind because I can sort of reference it is the old City Hall downtown. Yes. I grew up as a young kid going to the market, and certainly it was right there in the triangle across from Grafton's and Zellers. But so Ockmar is that type of unit, you know, where I think as we mature and move forward in our society and certainly in our city, we've grown to recognize things like our treasures that we should be maintaining for those that are to come. And so I think Ockmar represents that. When you go through the facility, you can see the terrific amount of work that is required, no question. But you can also see, and if you look close enough, the pristine potential that it can be returned to and obviously serve as a major asset. It's the only historical asset, by the way, on the mountain. And I think that as we continue to grow, we'll see more. But I think starting with Ockmar and calling for expressions of interest in order to get it moved along, I think is the appropriate thing to do. And I strongly support that activity and will continue to support it. And I'm sure even down the road we will find ways to utilize that building in contemporary times that will respond to needs that exist today and moving forward. So it's a great opportunity. For me, I see it as an opportunity, and I'm looking forward to it happening. So we'll wait now and see what types of expressions of interest that we can acquire. And certainly the most recent exercise at HECFI was one that you might consider to be sort of a mirror of that type of approach. And so I think we're looking forward to seeing a similar result at Ockmar and moving forward with both private and public partnerships to bring it about.
And the same staff who brought the Lister back to life are involved with Ockmar and have a passion for Ockmar. And I think the good thing about Ockmar at this point, Bernie, is that money is being put into the building to seal the building, to stop any of the degradation and you know, vandalism that has been going on that property, and it's being done in a more timely fashion than the Lister, which we almost lost. It literally was at death's door and was saved and brought back and is just brilliant downtown on James Street North. Ockmar is not that bad, and the work that's going into it right now gives us greater opportunity for that vision that I think you see. And I certainly, the amazing thing about Ockmar is it was locked away behind bushes forever.
Exactly.
Nobody ever got on that property. And the first time I walked on it, that's why I'm a friend. I fell in love with it and the potential
Absolutely.
of that property for the people of Hamilton.
Well, it's 9 acres of wonderful property with assets, buildings there with it. I think we're not going to waste the time that we did at Lister
Yes.
Block. We're sealing it. We're sealing it so that we can stabilize the situation, recognizing fully that we have work to do, and that work's going to, call for more money. But the bottom line is we're not going to allow the continuous erosion to occur while we work through deciding whether we're going to maintain this building or not. And for me, it's just a matter of recognizing very fully we need to maintain the building, so let's move on it. And I think Council saw that in its wisdom today, and I'm looking forward to what's to come.
For our viewers, of course, next Council will, I believe, just rubber stamp what happened today at the GIC. And then the target date for proposals and for public proposals will be late spring. So we'll be looking May, June for the next round over the discussion of Ockmar. I'm going to bump up a question because everybody's talking about it. The surprising resignation of the Premier of Ontario is one thing, but the proroguing of Parliament is another. It halts provincial business, and that has an impact not only on this city, but literally all the citizens of Ontario. There will be no discussion about bills that were being discussed. There will not be a poverty report from Francis Lankin. All of these things are on hold, and now the dilemma for the city of Hamilton is you are being downsized. Millions of dollars of provincial cuts are on our backs, and poor Joanne Priel has been asked by Council to come back with different ideas on how we cover this, and now there's no province to relate to. Tell me about some of the pitfalls of this proroguing for the city of Hamilton.
Well, the pitfall is the negative impacts that it brings about. First of all, let me just say that I think we all anticipated that Premier McGuinty, who has dedicated his life to public service and should be saluted for that, I think we anticipated that this would happen. Obviously, me included, I didn't expect it to happen so quickly, and I'm not so sure many of the insiders did either. But it's obviously a very personal decision by himself, as I would speculate. And the bottom line is then when he proceeds to prorogue government, and it certainly from our perspective, and those that are relative to the provincial government and the various ministries within it are now in what I would call gridlock. In an impasse, only insofar as that there needs to be a clear understanding of whether we're going to remain in gridlock. From my, again, perspective, we're looking at some programs down at the Scott Park precinct alone, which I'm sure we'll talk about later today, and looking at the synergies and the various partnerships that we might cultivate there to accomplish what we need to accomplish in response to the needs that exist in that community and throughout this city. But because of this, I know that just a week ago we were meeting with ministers and talking with ministers about trying to bring about certain things sooner than later, quite frankly. And the bottom line is now the fact that he has brought this thing into prorogue leaves it not very clear as to what can actually transpire given that they're not sitting. The other challenge for us is, I guess, the fact that some of the ministers who may be interested in pursuing that position in government certainly have been told clearly this morning, as I understood it, that if that's their position, then they should remove themselves from their ministerial spot. And even from this perspective that there may be a new minister that has to go in and take that over, would become a very strong concern about whether they would be up to speed enough to process some of the immediate projects that I know we're working on, school boards are working on, poverty groups are working on. So it certainly is a position that we would like to have avoided, and hopefully we will avoid it by getting further direction that the way to deal with this now will be as follows. That's certainly a hope of mine. Whether it occurs or not, I can't say at this point.
We have to wait until a Liberal convention and they determine who a new Liberal leader is before we get back to the business of governing in Ontario. I can think of an impact on the horse racing industry that's been waiting for Minister McMeekin's report, which should have been out by the end of next week, as I understood it. Things like that, the OLG deadlines for a lease in Flamborough, OLG deadlines for the city of Hamilton to potentially discuss a Plan B. I mean, is the casino debate worth having at this point in time until there's a new leader? We don't know. And you guys are supposed to start your budget deliberations next month. How do you start budget deliberations when you don't know if certain ministers will be in their positions, as you point out, or what the dollars are going to be from the province, because there's no one there to tell us?
And I think that's exactly the dilemma that I see. I would hope, though, that as we move forward, that the Premier, the former Premier, as you might want to refer to him, the resigning Premier, will see the need and will move in some way or fashion to deal with this. Some of the issues, you mentioned the casino as one, it's still my very strong position that I think that if we are to have a casino in this city, we should have the right to determine where we want it and if we want it. And I adhere to Council's position that we're quite pleased with the Flamborough setup, certainly from a perspective of the slots as well as the horsemen situation and the track. So, I hope that and maybe that will be a positive thing out of this particular situation that we can address, because at the present time, we're being told you have to say yes or no, and we don't have an opportunity to carry out a referendum given the expense associated with it. So we're having these town hall meetings, which we held the other night. Jason Farr organized it along with Brian McCaddy and myself, so wards 1, 2, and 3, which were symbolic and I think reflective of much of what people think in this community came forward. And we actually had a good opportunity to hear a mayor from a city that has a casino downtown who originally didn't support it. And then we also heard from a social worker who lives in Hamilton but works in Brantford, who literally explained very clearly the huge pitfalls associated with a casino, especially in the downtown area. So those that situation in itself, given the nature of the government status in Toronto, are certainly going to play a major part in what we do. But here we are again. We'll have to do with what we have before us, and we'll enter our budgets. And you, as you learned today, Joanne Priel, our Director of Social Services, is probably concerned as we are. And the bottom line, though, will be that we're going to have to make work whatever we have at our disposal.
I want to get into some Ward 3 issues surrounding the stadium and what's going on in the local neighborhood in just a moment, but that town hall was an excellent thing to have happen. I have heard you speak passionately at council regarding gambling in our downtown. I'd like you, I'm not going to say anything, but I've heard your passion, and I want you to explain, in case people did not catch the last council, your feelings about a casino in the downtown of Hamilton.
Well, I'm not a frequent casino visitor, but I have obviously participated in that activity, both locally as well as internationally in Las Vegas. I've seen those operations. I can tell you that when I live in community, although there are many members of my community, Ward 3 in particular, who support casinos, and certainly I've discussed it with them, the bottom line is I've seen the disasters that it has created in our social scene, whether it has led to everything from bankruptcy to divorce to mental suicidal situations. I can tell you that it, for the benefits that exist from it, and it would be my conclusion that putting it downtown, although it may be another piece to deal with our desire to have conference and convention activity in our community in the core, I would suggest that it won't make the contribution that I think that other things are making right now, whether it be things like Art Crawl or social programs that are developing neighborhood plans. And I'm quite content to accept the principle of casinos and accept Flamborough because it exists there. And although you have to make your way out there, I can tell you when I have been out there, I still maintain that when I stand in the corner and look for all those little white lights in the top of machines and how many are on, and on for the purposes of collecting. And then I also look at the people that are there. I sometimes get concerned because I see some of our seniors who are there to enjoy themselves, and it's their way of entertaining themselves. But amongst that group are also a number of people who obviously probably should be putting their resources to better use. I can remember as a kid being at Hazel Park track in Detroit, and looking back at that period of time when people were paid in cash at their gate when they were finished their work. And I can remember was saying to my dad, because we were at the track and it was a nice day out, and seeing people in the parking lot distraught because they had blown all their money. And clearly, you know, that happened here in Hamilton as well. And that's what one of the things that majorly led to the fact that companies were asked to deposit the money directly home so that the families could have access to the earnings of the person that worked so hard to get it. But obviously, when they were getting cash, periodically acted irresponsibly.
Because when they came home, there was a roller pin waiting for them.
Yeah, you know, and it's kind of so that side of it, you know. But the social impact versus the benefit, I think, is one that we need to look at very, very closely. And to me, it's not an absolute necessary component in the core of the city. And I'm quite happy to see it exist out in Flamborough with the track there and all the horsemen and the fact that people can go out there if they feel a propensity to do so.
Huge discussion over the weekend in the media, the blogs, the Twitter world, editorials in the paper, et cetera, et cetera. The Pan Am Stadium was unveiled this past Friday. Bernie Morelli, it's smack dab in the middle of Ward 3. Are you happy with the design?
Well, you know, I can tell you, and I'm not hesitating because I'm not able to say I'm happy. What I can tell you is, from the get-go, this has been a very difficult topic. As you know, I, as one member of council, was very strongly recommending and still would have hoped that it was going to go to the harbor front and the West Harbor. Unfortunately, it didn't go there, and you know, we can discuss that for whatever reason, but the bottom line is that it didn't go there, and it was decided that it would go to Ward 3 in the old Scott Park precinct where the Ivor Wynne Stadium currently exists. So, you know, accepting that fact, and then it became a question of signing the documents that put the thing in progress. And I think if we both are very, you know, reflective and recall the acrimony of that debate and what it ended up being, I think those documents were signed as to what procedures would be followed, one of which was the total secrecy under IO, which is Infrastructure Ontario, who took ownership of that project and obviously, you know, went out and called for, you know, interest in doing it. Arrived at 3 developers, not obviously including some of the more well-known developers. I know that, not to mention specific names, but I was involved in the dome, the Sky Dome construction from a steel perspective, and I remember Alice Dawn, you know, doing so much work in the Ontario community as well as Canadian community, and obviously they weren't in the package. So the bottom line was that they proceeded to do this in secret. So that was number one frustration. We were told.
You sat on the subcommittee with Lloyd Ferguson.
Lloyd Ferguson and I.
And Lloyd has gone public not only before the unveiling, but after the unveiling. He's still very unhappy with the process. And I know you chafed under that process as well. You had to sign a non-exclosure agreement. You couldn't talk about what was going on right in the heart of your ward.
It was very clear. We were both chafing, to say the least. And at the same time, we understood and had to accept the process. From my perspective, although I share Lloyd's interest in the costs and the expense, and I always you know, would reflect on the fact that to have a stadium, I knew we were going to have to spend somewhere in the area of $70 or $80 million, no matter what we did, wherever. Because if we were going to refurbish even Ivor Wynne, I've seen numbers varying from 30 to 75 million, and so I was happy getting the stadium. The second piece, and why Lloyd and I cheered it, was my thinking clearly was that if we're building a facility that's got $160 million of taxpayers' money, it's $60 million of City of Hamilton taxpayers' money from the Future Fund, of course. My real commitment was to say this facility needs to be a facility that is used 365 days of the year by not only the immediate community in and around the stadium, but throughout this whole city. And the fact of the matter is that if we don't exploit that opportunity, we will be making a big mistake. And I still am adhering to that position. I think that, you know, if we do not end up with a stadium that becomes much more than a football field, I can tell you it will be the biggest and most regretful disappointment that that I will ever have in civic politics. So,
well, what can the ripple be with the Scott Park community, the Keith neighborhood? What is the ripple? Because people have talked about economic impact or just a community impact on the same footprint. Well, you're there and you know that people have been talking. In fact, the Keith neighborhood has been before the GIC. So talk about what you see the potential being.
The potential is, you know,
we've got 5 minutes, and we want to get some other stuff in.
I refer to often, if you drive up to Turner Park, as a good example. You know, you drive up there and you see people walking in with duffel bags. You see people walking in with their books, going to the library. You see people going to the Y. You see kids, you know, on skateboards. You see the Hamilton Police Service is there. You see baseball, soccer, all these activities, plus even civic staff working to respond to the needs of people in that area. And I'm saying that's what I see down at the precinct. I mean, as you know, it's a very strong commitment of mine to see a community center, senior center developed in the lower city. I think the fact that that's been a major void of any proportions over the last number of years is needs to be dealt with, and I think Council has recognized that by you know, certainly supporting me as we move forward, and that's a facility that's coming on board. So, you know, for me, it's to see all these wonderful rooms, you know, which are going to serve as weight rooms and physio rooms and entertainment rooms. What are we doing with those pieces of property and spaces that can be utilized by community, not only in the immediate area, but certainly across this whole city? And so if that's not met, in fact, on Friday at the announcement, it was clear that I have asked for copies of each and every speech that was made. They referred to neighborhood, community legacy, and use by neighborhood. And so we must never forget that this is a facility, whether you like it or not, and we need to deal with that, is a facility that's owned by the City of Hamilton and the people of it. And it's not owned by anybody else, and I respect and admire the work of the Terracats as a kid that grew up watching them all my life. I can certainly talk about the history, the rich histories there, but the bottom line is they're one tenant amongst many, but it's an asset that's owned by the city for the people of this city, and it should be used by all the people of the city. And so if we miss that opportunity, we are failing.
A couple of items out of your award that we need to mention. Ottawa Street BIA and So Hungry. What an outstanding success. 22 trucks, food trucks, I believe, in the end. They've won awards for what they have been doing down there. Kudos to them. Mission Services tomorrow, big opening. You'll be there with the mayor on Wentworth Street North. And I said all those things so you didn't have to, because I know you want to talk about the Gage Park Mum Show.
Well, the Mum Show, certainly. I want to just address Ottawa Street briefly, if I could. You know, I watched the transition of Ottawa Street. I was there in its glory days, hung out on Ottawa Street, and went down to the original Mr. Pugh at Canadian Tire there, watched Ron Joyce quit policing, go into donut business, and we all sort of went, Ron, I wonder what he's doing.
And we all used to line up outside of the Avon.
Right, and we were outside the Avon. We were in Home Outfitters. There was the old Harley company, Zellers. So I saw that and I lived that, and then eventually I saw the demise. And then clearly I had the opportunity to work with my good colleague, Councillor Morelli later, but certainly right from the beginning when I saw them develop a niche market, which coming from the corporate sector personally, it was a principle that I knew that major corporations were adhering to. They were looking for niches to adhere to. Ours happened to be textile on Ottawa Street. I can remember working with George from European Textiles and having many a very contested settings and exchanges. But inevitably, they developed their plans, they set their objectives, they developed the strategies. And today, when you see So Hungry as just one example, that's sort of momentary and exciting, but more importantly, on an ongoing basis, each day, and I think it speaks well to what I'm talking about with respect to Stadium. On a daily basis, that community is a hub, and it's working as a hub. People are going to it, and I think we should be proud of the Ottawa streets and the Lock streets that have evolved, but it hasn't been without a lot of effort. So that's certainly something I'm really proud of and happy to be a part of with my good colleague, Councillor Morelli. The Mum Show, of course, is in a facility that I know you know well. I grew up in that park, and my commitment has always been to see it redeveloped, where it would maintain the wonderful traditions of the past, as well as incorporate the new things moving forward. And as recently as this year, of course, amongst the fountain being redeveloped and the ball diamonds being repossessioned, we had concerts return for the first time on Sunday night. It's going to do nothing but grow further, and we were very successful. And I remember as a kid, of course, years ago, attending the various bands that have visited there, the Frontiersmen, the light infantries that came in, and certainly people responded extremely well to it. The other thing is, when you're driving down Main Street, it's a very visible park now, and it brings about not only some aesthetic wonders, but it also provides some great security features for those that are trying to maintain securities in that park. Unfortunately, we have to deal periodically with social issues today, but that park is a safe place to be, and it's a place to go and enjoy everything from young kids playing soccer to baseball to listening to music to, of course, visiting the Mum Show, where our staff put together a phenomenal creative show, and I would encourage everyone to attend. I see that developing even further into a Christmas festival scenario, right into Winterfest with a small break, and into a more extensive summer program that's going to be responsive, I think, to the contemporary needs of this whole community in terms of music and certain carnival activities.
We got to run. I remember my only triple, though, for the CKOC baseball team at one of those diamonds. It's integral to this city.
Thanks very much.
Thanks,
Doug.
Councillor Bernie Morelli. Thank you.
Thank you.
That is the Council edition for Wednesday, October 17th. We return in 2 weeks with Ward 6 Councillor Tom Jackson. I'm Doug Farraway. Thank you for watching.